also agreed that we needed to call on the world, particularly your more developed economies, to come to Africa's assistance from an economic point of view so that they provide stimulus, so that we are able to have the resources to support our economies, but also to allow the manufactured goods that we need from various countries, such as medical supplies, to be imported into Africa. They should not close Africa off.
Good evening. This is Economics Unbound. Tonight we talk about the blighting of our economy. The economy tonight will come to a crashing halt as South Africa goes into lockdown. It is estimated that about 8% of South Africa's GDP will be decimated in these 21 days. Estimations differ as to the extent of the plunge in our economic fortunes as a nation and as a people. Some people say 200 billion will be wiped out of our growth prospects in the 21 days. And for example, ABSA Bank expects a 3% plunge in GDP. But all agree we are in for a chilling time. Starting tonight, we count the costs in jobs lost in this economy, in livelihoods vanished, in the further withering away of our manufacturing sector, and in the blighting of our mining sector. The latter is the founding industry, the bedrock on which we built this country and this economy. But do gain comfort, for it is not the entire mining sector that will shut down, as coal will continue, as it is much needed to power Eskom, as the hospitals and the health sector of our nation go to war against COVID-19. Will the president add a significant stimulus package in phase 2 of the economic measures to mitigate the economic impacts? Or will we ask the IMF and the World Bank to come to our assistance? It was a sobering moment tonight for South Africa as the president sent the troops out to wage a war of a different kind. Many wonder if we will fight to reignite the economy with equal gallantry and equal vigor. Good evening, Nana and dear viewer. I'm Tandeka Grubelembeki.
It's a bitter harvest that we're reaping as a people at the moment. Fund versus stimulus. Basically, an economic stimulus consists of attempts by governments to stimulate an economy. An economic stimulus is the use of monetary or fiscal policy changes to kickstart growth during a recession or tough times like now. A stimulus can raise productive output levels in an economy and raise incomes in the short run. But it has to be precise, targeted and temporary.
Yes, Nana, fiscal stimulus can include tax cuts, and there were plenty of those in the slew of measures announced by the president, especially the kind of tax relief that shields the most vulnerable and the poor in society.
Yes, a fiscal stimulus can increase overall demand in an economy, and Korokoro, our new virus, was a double whammy for both the demand side of the economy and the supply side. It's argued by some economists that a stimulus is timely at the moment. Its effects are felt when economic activity is in the doldrums. They also say that a stimulus must be for a short period of time so as to avoid inflationary pressures and to minimize the effects of a larger budget deficit.
ABSA Corporate and Investment Banking says the impact of COVID-19 on the economy will be devastating. It says the decision to shut down the country for 21 days will hurt productivity in key sectors such as mining and manufacturing. Economist Mike Schuessler says while government measures announced on Monday are plentiful, but they are not enough.
Businesses are not going to be able to get enough because the government doesn't have enough funds. Already there are many limits in place as to the size of the business, that it shouldn't have been in trouble beforehand. All these sort of things are there, and it's very difficult to see how informal business is going to be able to survive in these times. It will be really a matter for most businesses, I think, of just keeping their heads down, doing what they need to do, and trying to survive.
The measures announced amount to nearly 14 billion rands. This is over and above other measures applied. Countries such as the United States, the United Kingdom and New Zealand have put in place stimulus packages.
The use of the UIF, it was something that was negotiated before this decision around the lockdown. It was a Labour initiative. It was not a government initiative. So quite frankly, government has not really come with anything of substance to the table except 100 million rands from National Treasury. And I think that's such a tragedy.
But Treasury says there is enough money to provide the government fiscal room to respond to critical interventions related to the shutdown. This, it says, will be done by reprioritizing government budgets.
The money is there. The money is in the budget. The money is in the system. It's through reprioritization. You heard the Minister of Tourism saying that they'll make 200 million available. This is from existing monies and resources where we are approving environments from other programs to specific COVID-19 related programs. And that's working. Same with the 150 million rand that Minister Patel was talking about of seed funding for the Solidarity Fund. He did indicate that we'll be putting 100 million from Treasury. Effectively, it's again looking at budgets, slicing off some budgets that are clearly not going to be spent. I can tell you now as an example, if you look at what's going to happen on the travel budgets across the departments, in national departments we have about, on average, on a monthly basis, spend about 280 million. That 280 million won't be spent for domestic and international travel. So effectively, that means that money will have to be reprioritized. So that 100 million, for instance, is coming from such programs. And as he said, the 50 million is coming from the lottery. So there is money in the system currently that's not going to be, and we are reprioritizing to specific COVID-19 programs.
Against a possible credit downgrade by Moody's, analysts say government's options could be limited unless additional stimulus measures are introduced. They are predicting that the central bank may have to further cut interest rates, with some saying by as much as 50 basis points. This is in addition to the 100 basis points announced last week. Diabo Seto, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, Africa will shed at least 1.4% of its gross domestic product, GDP, this year, following a disruption of economies in the continent due to the spread of COVID-19, according to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. African finance ministers have also warned that at least 30 million jobs on the continent are at risk, especially in the tourism and airline sectors. In Kenya, the Finance Ministry has revised its projected economic growth for 2020 from 6.1% to 3.2%, following economic shocks as a result of the disruption to trade. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta on Wednesday announced a raft and a slew of measures aimed at cushioning Kenyans from the effects of the coronavirus. Sarah Kimani reports from there.
In a presidential address, Kenyatta outlined measures his government says will cushion Kenyans and small and medium enterprises from the expected economic shocks brought by measures put in place to slow down the spread of the disease.
That the National Treasury moves to Parliament to offer the following immediate reliefs: an increased disposable income to the people of Kenya through a 100% tax relief for persons earning a gross monthly income of up to Kenya shillings 24,000. A B, reduction of the income tax rate or pay as you earn from its current maximum of 30% to 25%. C, a reduction of resident income tax or corporation tax from 30% to 25%. A D, a reduction of the turnover tax rate from the current 3% to 1% for all micro, small, and medium enterprises.
The bulk of the country's population is in the micro, small and medium enterprises sector. With a slowdown in the economy, many will find it difficult to service their loans, including the now popular digital loans acquired through mobile phones. Kenyatta offering temporary relief.
The Central Bank of the Republic of Kenya has additionally rolled out the following measures. That is, the lowering of the central bank rate, the CBR, to 7.25% from the prevailing 8.25%, which should prompt commercial banks to lower the interest rate to their borrowers, availing the much-needed and affordable credit to all our businessmen and women. The temporary suspension of the listing with the Credit Referencing Bureau, or the CRB, of any person, micro, small or medium enterprise, as well as corporate entities whose loan account fall due or is in arrears, effective 1st of April 2020.
He also announced salary cuts for top government officials. While a section of Kenyans welcomed these measures, they feel many will still be left without an income for the period of the partial lockdown, and that in the end, job losses are inevitable. Sarah Kimani, SABC News, Kenya.
Now on Skype, we have the currency risk specialist and director at Treasury One, and his name is Andre Silius. He has extensive experience in both treasury and banking, and we're happy that he's joining us now. Welcome, Andre. Hello.
Hello, Dandi, and good evening to all the listeners as well.
What do you make of it? What are your estimates? Have you been doing many models that are trying to predict the extent of the economic impact of the 21 days? A penny for your thoughts.
Yes, okay. If you run the numbers and you look at what's happening throughout the world and within South Africa and with the lockdown, the estimates is that our economic growth can contract by anything between 4 and 7% this year, which is substantial. And if you run some numbers on job losses, etc., then we could easily shed between 650,000 and 1 million jobs because of this. And then, of course, we can also see a lot of bankruptcies, especially amongst small and medium-sized enterprises. And your corporates is not shed from this as well. They will also obviously have fairly large declines in their profits, etc. But if you look at the stock exchange, then that's what the stock exchange has told us in the last 2-3 weeks.
Now, Andre, this is happening in the world's most unequal society. What will our society be like when we recover from this disease?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. If I look, and I've traveled quite extensively this week through the country quickly, and I've spoken to a lot of people on high level and on low level, people at petrol stations, people in restaurants, and the feeling that I get from everybody is that everybody is in this together. So we're in this 21-day lockdown period, and I think everybody is quite positive of it. And I think Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, as our president, my words that on Monday night he looked presidential, he acted presidential, and he showed great leadership. And I think everybody has got appreciation for that and the proactiveness of our government in this. We're seeing opposition parties standing side by side to Mr. Ramaphosa on this. So I think as a society, we'll come out a little damaged, but a lot more united. And I think if that's the one thing that comes out of it, then that's not all bad. Then there's good coming out, and we can build on a better future I think the cooperation of each and every South African in this 21-day lockdown period is of the utmost importance. We don't need criticism. We need people to stand together. We need to stick with the rules, and we have to make the best of this and fight this thing and come out as a united country.
Now, I do not want to be a party pooper or somebody who's going to kick a gift horse in the shins, but the question must be asked. It seems almost certain that this country, due to the lockdown, may be able to flatten the rising curve of the pandemic's the prevalence levels of the disease, but the jury seems to be out on whether we can flatten the recession curve.
I think that's not that easy to flatten the recession curve. The recession is something that's on us. There's no ways that we can escape that at this point anymore. The only thing that we can try and do is to flatten the curve of the infection rate, and that will bring us back to an economy that's working and back to productivity as soon as possible. And that, if we can do that, but that we need the cooperation of the people of South Africa, that will flatten the curve of the recession eventually.
What's in the mind of Moody's as we approach tomorrow?
I think in the mind of Moody's is, if you look at the figures that's going to come out, government spending is going to be a little bit out of control due to the situation. We might need to borrow more money. The income of the South African government from tax side will be less. So the vital statistics in terms of borrowing as a percentage of GDP and all those vital statistics will be worse. And I think in the minds of Moody is that this is the right time to downgrade South Africa. And I must honestly say that, yes, that's very important for us to not really being downgraded. But at this stage, we have more important factors to deal with than the downgrade. We need to fight this virus, flatten the curve, have services that can cope with the increase in infection rate or the nominal amount of infections. That's far more important at this stage, to come out united on that and fight that.
Last key question. What single lesson do you think we will have learned when we emerge?
The single biggest lesson that we will have learned is to live hygienically, to be prepared in cases for disaster like this, both financially and from a moral point of view. And so people should take from this that from the little bit that they have, to save and put something aside for when crisis strikes, so that you are able to come through this. And then the other biggest thing that I would like to come from this is, as I said earlier, a united country. A country that stands together side by side, irrespective of who you are, how rich you are, how poor you are, or what color you are.
Thank you, Andre. Stay safe during the lockdown. Now, the lockdown that takes effect tonight at midnight will be extremely costly to South Africa as we attempt to flatten the upward disease curve and the prevalence graph. We must also earnestly attempt to flatten the recession curve through further fiscal and monetary measures. The direct and indirect hit to the economy will be between, some say, 600 billion and 800 billion, and those are the losses to GDP. During the global financial crisis, GDP dropped by 1.5%, and we lost 1 million jobs. We will be definitely likely to lose in the region of 2 million jobs. Now, millions of people will go without meals, people will go hungry. Now, joining me to discuss more are my honorable colleagues, Aldrin Sampear and Tshepiso Makwetla. Colleagues, are you ready for a lockdown?
Are we ready? I don't know whether we are ready, because certainly the economy isn't ready, and especially the informal market. And earlier on we spoke to Diabo, who spoke to informal traders and hawkers in the CBD, and they don't know where the next meal would be coming from, or even where the next profit will be coming from, because they believe that they haven't been taken into consideration around the plans that have been put in place by the Minister of Small Businesses. For the 500 million rand, for instance, a lot of people have said that they've gone to the portal and tried to apply, but the portal keeps on shutting them out.
But there was an alternative, sorry Tepi, there was an alternative fund, a sort of informal fund by South Africans, as they pledged on Facebook and on Twitter to actually spend their last cents with the hawkers of South Africa and on the streets of our urban centres, so that they have some money to survive the last 21 days.
I have to say that those visuals were quite heartwarming here. I saw even a former member of parliament, I saw a DJ as well doing exactly the same thing, and just handing out money and buying some of the food. And some people are actually saying that, why don't you just give away the money? But I guess there is a more valuable lesson in what they've done, to say that let's continuously support the informal market as well. But unfortunately, during this lockdown, where would you find them?
I was very touched. And you, Tsepi?
Well, I was going to say that the encouragement is that people do support their local spaza shops at this point. So that is another way of trying to build at least the township economies around us. But spare thought, Simphiwe Ngongane, our colleague, who's going to be with us for the rest of this broadcast until 1 a.m. Spare thought for those people who, I was saying to Tandega earlier on, who are being thrown out of their rented apartments because either landlords feel that they can't pay in time, or actually they don't have the money to pay.
It's that time of the month.
Indeed, and just going back to the point that Alden raised with regards to the hawkers in the informal market, I just spoke to, a couple of days ago, I spoke to a vendor in one of the streets of Joburg who said that she normally makes about 50 to 100 rand per day, and without business for 2 days is bad enough. How much more 21 days without business? And the fact that the UIF isn't catering for them. Some of these funds that have been announced are not catering for the informal market, and it really will be a bumpy ride for the informal traders.
We will stay broadcasting to the public and to the South African citizen, as is our mandate. We'll be sharing with them the numbers that they can phone for those UIF fund withdrawals. We'll be sharing a number of other useful numbers for all of them. Thank you for having me on Full View. Thank you very much. Good night.
Special
Keep
live
safe.
Broadcast, as you can see, all teams combined. It's what broadcasting with no borders.
I have to say, though, the way that Nana started the intro earlier on with the brrrr, yes, the cold is coming.
Thank you for watching tonight's show. Until next time, good night. Stay safe.